Well, if you're just tuning in, or even if you've been here for a few minutes, either way, this is going to be news to you. For you haven't heard my dear friend James. Pastor James of Wilmot Center Church was just introducing the evening, but I'm going to do that because it seems that my mic, unlike his, is working right now. So so this was originally going to be an in-person event at Wilmot Center Church, but in light of the global pandemic, James brilliantly put together this evening so that we can now, instead of just doing it within the walls of the church, can open up to the whole world, including yourself. We're going to be taking questions tonight. So even now, please type in your questions if you have any questions about evil, suffering, God, or really anything that has to do with the Bible or anything. We just love to hear from you. When you ask your question, it'd be really fun if you could include what city you're asking from. And even if you're not asking a question, even if you're just here to watch, just type in, even right now on Facebook or YouTube, whatever you're watching from, please type in what city you're watching from. It makes it a lot more personal for us because we can't see you. And we'd love to at least connect somehow with your name and a city or whatever. So please, my colleague Alonzo is going to open up the night with an 18-minute talk, maybe even 17 and a half minutes because we're starting a little late. And then I'll speak for also 17 and a half minutes. And then the rest of the night, about 80 minutes, will be Q&A. So you have every opportunity to just grill us over the coals, asking your toughest questions. We would love to hear your toughest questions. So please type them in, or your easy questions too. But enough about the format. Now let me introduce my colleague. He's also my best friend. He was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta. He got involved in drugs and a whole myriad of self-destructive decisions from a young age. But everything changed when he gave his life to Jesus in his young 20s. He's an entrepreneur. Him and his wife own a small business. It's an ever-growing business, but yeah, they're small business owners. And then he went off to Oxford University, where he just recently graduated with a degree from Oxford, and he's also a graduate of the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. This man is well educated, but even more importantly, he lives the very things he speaks about, and it means the world to me as his friend and colleague. So without further ado, please welcome Alonzo, Julian, Paul.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if my head will fit in the screen after that glowing review and introduction. Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you so much, Pastor James, for having Daniel and I with you. And I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me as well before I dive in. Is everything sounding good, looking good? That's more debatable, perhaps, but as long as you can hear me, that's okay. I'm going to assume that everything is fine. I'm looking at the comments. Looks like everything is okay. So I'm privileged to talk with you guys first about the problem of evil and suffering. And I just want to express, if you're somebody that's really going through something right now, my heart goes out to you. I don't have all of the answers. Daniel does not have all of the answers, but we've thought very deeply and concentrated a lot of our focus of our studies on this problem in particular. And so what we want to do, since we've thought so deeply, is show you and share with you some of the things that we've picked up along the way. Because like Daniel said, we are in unprecedented times that we have never experienced before, at least in our lifetimes. Not only is there an overwhelming amount of suffering from coronavirus, but there's also the suffering that has always transpired in our world. So Daniel and I are so honored to be able to think through this with you guys. So let me begin. I want to turn your attention to a particularly sophisticated and extraordinarily complex volume of philosophy, and it is Marvel's Black Panther. Perhaps in the comment section, let me know if you've seen Marvel Black Panther before. And it is extraordinary. And again, this is purely for academic purposes that we're going to be diving into this literature. I thought the movie was dope, or profound was probably a more scholarly term for it. And I hope that you guys seen it as well. But as soon as I seen it, I downloaded the soundtrack. And one of the soundtracks that's worth reflecting on is Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd. Maybe let me know in the comments too if you know who Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd are. But they have this fascinating song on it, and it's called Pray For Me. And I want to just read these words. I'm not going to rap these words because I don't want to add to your suffering. I want to help you think through your suffering. So I'm not going to rap it for you, but I'll say it out to you like this. It says this: who's going to save me from myself when this life is all I know? Tell me, who's going to save me from this hell? I'm all alone. Who's going to pray for me, take my pain for me, save my soul for me? Because I'm all alone, you see. Now, I think the questions that Kendrick Lamar and The Weeknd are raising here are giving voice to the reality of suffering that we all face in our lives. From the depths of their soul, they're crying out to anyone who will listen, who's going to help me? Who's going to save me? And maybe you felt that way too. Maybe you thought those same questions. The questions about suffering, I'll tell you this, are the most difficult ones that we will ever think about theologically, intellectually, philosophically, emotionally, personally. They're the most difficult ones for us to think about, no matter what you believe or what religion you ascribe to. And that's a very important point as we dive into this talk. Whether you're a Christian or an atheist or something else entirely, we all have to wrestle through this question of suffering at one time or another. And if you're sitting here in real pain, I just want to say to you, I am so, so sorry for what you're going through. 13 months ago, my brother Andrew, who is my best friend and my hero, passed away after battling cancer for 2 long years. And it was the most difficult thing I've ever been through. As many people who have suffered know, it changed me forever. And let me just say this to you. If you're somebody who is truly hurting, I unashamedly stand here before you to tell you that Jesus can and is willing to help you through the deepest and darkest parts of your suffering. And it is a journey, and you can reach out to people like your pastor in order to help you along that journey of suffering. So please don't be afraid to ask for help. I know I certainly did, and that helped me tremendously. So I'm going to break down this talk into 2 sides, 2 components. First, we're going to look at the intellectual side, the logical side of the problem of evil and suffering. And on the other side, I'm going to look at the emotional side. You know, we're not purely logical, we're also biological. So we need both components as we think through this problem. And then Daniel's going to come on and take it to the next step before Q&A. So that's going to be some of the roadmap for this evening, for those of you who like roadmaps. So the number one is the intellectual or logical problem of suffering. And if you've never heard this before, it's used by people to argue against the existence of God, to say, in another way of phrasing that is to show that God's existence is impossible because of suffering. So it goes like this. You may have come across this online or maybe amongst your friends at school or university, and it goes like this. It's 3 parts. If God is all powerful and all loving, then he wouldn't allow suffering. But suffering does exist. Therefore, the conclusion is that God must not exist. And here's the heart of the problem. And this is what they're thinking. Since God is all powerful, then he should be powerful enough to stop suffering. And if God is all loving, then he should be so loving that he would want to stop all of the suffering that we see in our world. So atheists use this to say that the conclusion logically follows that it's logically impossible for God to coexist besides suffering. Now, let's do a little thought experiment. Suppose there is no God. Suppose that this is true. Let me ask you a very important question. I challenge you to think about this deeply. Does throwing away God solve the intellectual or emotional side of the problem of suffering? And the answer seems to be, well, no. We're still left in a reality that is full of suffering, where suffering exists in all of our lives. In fact, if we get rid of the idea of God or the person of God, it gets even worse because throwing away God comes at an enormous price because it ultimately devalues your suffering, robs you of any potential meaning, and destroys the possibility of ultimate justice, ultimate restoration, and ultimate hope. Now, this isn't a critique that just comes from Christians towards atheistic views. but it comes from atheism itself. Think about it, and it makes a lot of sense. If there is no God, then logically there is nothing more natural in our world than suffering, than violence, than pain and injustice. Without God, there's nothing more natural than the strong overpowering the weak. It's just natural selection. The very famous atheist Richard Dawkins, who is a professor of biology at Oxford University, he writes this: in a universe of blind physical forces, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it. At bottom, there is no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. So what's he saying when he's saying something like that? That if we get rid of the person of God, then far from solving the problem of suffering, he's arguing that the universe is completely indifferent to the suffering that you're experiencing. It doesn't matter at all. And who cares? You're just simply unlucky. A popular atheist psychologist, Susan Blackmore, says something very similar. In an interview, she said, "My response to all of the tragedies around the world is that nothing matters. It's all empty and meaningless. It's just the way the world is. Get used to it." Now, I think deep on the inside, you know that this isn't true. And it's a high price to pay. So responding to the problem that we started with initially is really, really important, because if the argument is true, then the conclusion is true. And I think the conclusion is awful if it is true. There's a famous author. His name is C.S. Lewis. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia books, and maybe you've heard of those too. They're really good. I highly recommend them. But he says this: it is critically important to examine the hidden assumptions within a question. Now, an assumption is something that we just assume is correct. So I'll give you an example. So if my bae, my boo, my Punjabi princess, my wife, Khadija, is to come into my room and she's just bought a new dress and she says, "Hey, how does this look?" You better believe, fam, that there are some hidden assumptions going on there, and I better recognize them before I respond. And I better be responding, "Hey, babe, that dress is lit. It is pure fire. You look so, so good." So, likewise, we have to ask, are there hidden assumptions within the problem of evil and suffering itself? And many scholars say yes. Philosophy has come, and theology, in fact, have come leaps and bounds in the past 50 years, 100 years or so, in identifying these hidden assumptions. I'm going to briefly name for you two, and if you are more curious, then we can respond to more during the Q&A time. But some of the hidden assumptions, I'll give you two. The first one is that God can just create any sort of world that he wants because he's all powerful. But that actually does not seem to be the case, because the God of the Bible is a God who wills that his free creatures can experience meaningfully his love. For love is the supreme ethic within God's universe. And therefore, we need to be free creatures. And if we're free creatures, because, well, loving a robot or a puppet on string that can only do good and only do what God wants isn't actually real love. And with freedom comes the possibility of incurring evil and suffering in our world. The second assumption, very quickly, is that the question itself assumes that God couldn't have any good reasons for why he would allow certain things, certain evils, and certain sufferings to occur. Now, the problem with that statement, as many scholars have identified now, is that it is impossible to know if God has any good reasons. They could be perhaps beyond our understanding, or we can look into the Bible itself and to see what God thinks about all of these different reasons. Anyone that knows going to the gym on leg day, for instance, knows that some suffering can be good. Now, I'm not saying that this suffering that you're experiencing is because God has some reason and he's inflicted this upon you. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying here that it is possible for God to exist alongside evil and suffering. Now, if you have more questions, we can respond to that during the Q&A, but I want to finish with the emotional side and give a good amount of time to it, because I think that this is probably the problem of evil is less an intellectual one and more of a heart one. And earlier I had mentioned my brother Andrew, and again, he was my best friend and my hero. And he was a follower of Jesus and trusted in Jesus till the very last day. In fact, I was holding his hand and we were praying together as he passed away and went home to be with the Lord. And when I was talking to my brother, I remember after a particular operation, I asked him, Andrew, what was the one thing, besides being cured, what's the one thing that you wanted the most? And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, Alonzo, I wanted somebody to be there. I did not want to be alone in my pain. And I think that that's true. Isn't that true deep on the inside of all of us? That if we can't stop the pain outright, then we want someone to be with us in our pain. Do you guys remember the famous basketball player Kobe Bryant, who sadly, tragically passed away earlier this year in January with his daughter and a full helicopter full of people? And do you guys remember what we all did who admired Kobe, loved Kobe? What did we all do on our social media? Well, we posted about him. We posted pics and quotes and moments where Kobe really touched our lives and influenced us and so on. And these pics and quotes communicated a powerful message to his loved ones, to his family and friends. And it was this: by posting, the message that was sent was that their tragedy has not gone unnoticed, that we care about the horrific situation that they were facing, and that they were not alone in their pain. By posting, and this is so critical to capture, by posting, we, in a significant sense, entered into the pain and suffering that the Kobe family went through. And that is exactly the message of the cross of Jesus Christ to a hurting world. However, Jesus didn't merely enter into our suffering world, he suffered in our world. No other religion, none, has at the center of it a suffering God, a scarred God at the center of their faith. We may not know exactly why you or me or my brother or any of those sorts of situations, we may not know exactly why we're experiencing those particular hurts, but based on the cross, and you got to hear me closely here, because based on the cross of Jesus Christ, what we can say is that you're not alone in your suffering. Because if God didn't care, he would not have come. God cares. You matter to God. Have you ever thought about that? And he invites you to allow him to take your pain because he understands. Isn't that what Kendrick Lamar in The Weeknd wanted? Somebody to be with them in their pain, somebody to understand them in their pain and in their hurt. I want to finish with a very quick story. And it was a story that comes out of our office is in the CBC building. RZIM's office is in the CBC building. And it's downtown Toronto. And we had this lovely exhibition going on. It's called Beautiful. I'm reaching for the book right now, and hopefully nothing goes wrong. It was called Beautiful. And it was about these women who were these brave, brave women who had suffered bridal burnings. Now, in India, there's some 8,000 of these cases that go on. And we had an artist that came and painted these brave women, and as they were restored and healed and cared for and ministered to. And so we had all of these paintings of all of these women that were so brave all over our office building. And one day, a non-Christian gentleman came into our building. His name is Naweed, and his name is very important. His name is Naweed, and he came into our building. He was not a Christian, and he came just to admire all of the artwork. And as he's admiring all the artwork, we got to my favorite picture, which is a group of ladies that are in the corner. It's just a photograph, it's not even a painting. And it is of these scarred women laughing and together. And he asked me a question that I'll never, ever forget. He said, Alonzo, do these women live in a community with each other? And I said, I'm not sure if they do. I'm curious, why do you ask? And he said to me, and I'll never forget his response. He said, Alonzo, I think that they do, because it is only those with scars that could possibly understand the scars of others. I said to him, now, we come from completely different worldviews, completely different religions. But the good news, or the gospel of Christianity, is that at its heart, we have a scarred God who understands your scars and mine. And in the midst of our scars, gives us strength, comfort, meaning, and hope. That's Christianity's good news. And the poetic irony of that story is that I asked him, Naweed, I've never heard your name before. What's your name? As we were exiting the office. And he said to me, Alonzo, is an Arabic name, and it means good news. And in the same way that Naweed, or good news, came into our office that day, good news for all those who suffer came into our world through the person of Jesus Christ. I think it's interesting, and just this is as I close, I think it's interesting that the coronavirus, it causes this very natural and understandable reflex of fear in us. There is a fear of potential contamination or maybe even death. And again, my heart goes out to anyone that's really struggling. I have a stepsister that's on the front lines right now. But I think this is interesting, this fear of potential contamination and death, which I think is fair enough. And we certainly need to be careful and prayerful and charitable towards others during this time. But what really strikes me is that Jesus, who knew no contamination, took into his body the ultimate contamination of sin, a far more lethal virus, so that we could be cured. I think a God with that sort of overwhelming kind of love for you and for me is one that we can trust in, cling to, and hope in. For Jesus is the lone scarred God who understands our scars and is willing to give us that strength and peace that we so desire, and those answers that we so desire during these uncertain times. Do you know how the New Testament ends? It ends with Jesus' words, I will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. We may possess momentary suffering right now, but it will one day be swamped with joy and restoration by God himself. Thank you so much for giving me a listen. I really appreciate your time. And without any further ado, I get to the honor of introducing my best friend, Daniel Gilman, who I look up to. He is incredible. I don't want to eat into his time, but he has a powerful message and response to the problem of evil and suffering for you guys right now. So take another sip of your tea or another bite of your chicken, sit down, get ready, and here is Daniel Gilman.
Thank you so much, Alonzo. And Alonzo, thank you for sharing, not only from your learning and wrestling through the topic, but also even from your own pain. As your friend, as your best friend, I got to see just how painful, how absolutely devastating that season last year, as you so painfully, tragically lost your brother Andrew. And it means a lot to me, and I think all of us watching, that you're willing to so transparently and authentically share of your own story, your own pain. These are, the question tonight, that we're wrestling through almost the whole evening, is the question, does the reality of my suffering, does the reality of my pain disprove the goodness or even existence of God? And so I thank you for taking us into your own life. James's mic might not be working, so I'm gonna have to just introduce myself real quick. because I realized I didn't do that when we started. And then I'll share for probably, I'm gonna pare my talk down to about, like, let's see if we can do in 14 minutes, and then we'll get right into Q&A. So even now, please be commenting your questions below. Let us know what city you're watching from, even if you don't have a question. And please, on YouTube or Facebook, comment your questions. My name is Daniel, as Alonzo alluded to. I worked for about the past 10 years at Parliament Hill, where I got to work with members of Parliament who are fighting human trafficking and a number of other issues of sexual exploitation. I also served as a pastor for university students at the Metropolitan Bible Church up in Ottawa. And then I recently got ordained, and even more recently got married, and even more recently moved to Toronto to become Alonzo's colleague, working full-time as a speaker and a writer, as an apologist with RZIM Canada. And it's an absolute joy to be with you tonight. It's a joy, but we're talking about some tough stuff. So we'll get right into it. On January 26, 2016, I escaped from the frigid cold of Ottawa's sub-zero temperature into my basement apartment. Taking off layers of layers, I opened up my MacBook Air, and I stared straight into the eyes of an image I hope to God to never see. 5 years earlier, I joined a handful of friends moving into a low-income neighborhood. This was part of a project where we would run children's after-school programs and a myriad of initiatives of trying to help people climb out of poverty. And of all the children who we got to help, there was one kid who stood out from all the rest. Her name was Kayla, and she was the most fun, sparkly kid I've ever met. If you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard illustrations and stories from her, because they're the most fun, vibrant stories. And every week, our team would get together and we'd pray for the well-being and for the safety of these children. And each week, I literally prayed to God, saying, please keep these children from human trafficking, keep them safe from kidnappers. See, our neighborhood was particularly vulnerable to human traffickers, as all broken, low-income neighborhoods are. She was from an Indigenous family, and I was aware that Indigenous women and girls are the most frequently trafficked demographic in Canada. Now, after 5 precious years of friendship with this child, I found myself in my basement apartment, staring straight into her eyes in a missing child poster posted on Facebook. I'd come home from work to prepare for speaking to her in Vancouver. I had speeches to prep, laundry to do, and then a plane to catch. All of a sudden, none of that mattered. I quickly called up one of the women on our team who was also close to Kayla, and the two of us headed out onto the wintry street in desperate search for this little girl, not feeling anything but raw, cold fear for Kayla, the child in the missing child poster. I shot Kayla a quick message on Facebook, hoping against hope that she might see it. After some time on the streets, I received a reply from her. She said she hadn't eaten in 2 days, was somewhere lost on the streets, didn't know where. She was in shorts and a t-shirt. And in response to my question, if there's anything we could help her with, she said, no, there's nothing you can do. I messaged back and said, Kayla, we're also on the street, and we will not stop looking for you until we find you. How much is a little girl worth? I've been able to share this story in universities and a variety of venues across Canada. And whether I'm in a church setting or at a university with people who don't believe in the Christian God or any God, no matter what people's background, philosophy, or religion is, I know that everybody agrees that a little girl is worth searching for until we find her. But if we're honest with ourselves, the question of a human worth, the question of how much is a little girl worth, is tied directly to the question about the reality of human suffering, evil, and the existence of God. That's why I'm skeptical of the idea of naturalistic atheism. The highly respected Canadian philosopher and professor, the late Kai Nielsen, a devout atheist, confessed this in an academic journal. He says, we have not been able to show that reason requires the moral point of view, or that all really rational persons, unhoodwinked by myth or ideology, need not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. He writes, reason does not decide here. The picture I have painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflection on it depresses me. Pure practical reason, even with a good knowledge of the facts, will not take you to morality, end quote. Nielsen acknowledges that materialistic atheism has no grounds to condemn the suffering of children or people of any age. One of the world's most famous atheists, Oxford professor emeritus Richard Dawkins, agrees that atheism does not have the grounds to deem any suffering as truly wrong or evil. He writes in his famous book, River Out of Eden, Our Darwinian View of Life, which was published in 1996. He writes this, and I quote, the total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation. It must be so. Some people are going to get hurt, and other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties that we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing, but blind, pitiless indifference. Dawkins' view of human worth is bleak. There's nothing really that separates human beings being crushed from a leaf being trampled. From the atheistic perspective, we're just a collection of atoms, we're just organic matter. Ascribing true worth to anything is just a matter of personal preference. It's a subjective reality. But do we really believe that? I think that in the late 20th and early 21st century, we did as a society. But thankfully, in recent years, that perspective has crumbled. On October 15th, 2017, Alyssa Milano, a Hollywood actress, posted a tweet famously, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write me too," as a reply to this tweet. She ignited a firestorm of courage and vulnerability, as by the end of that day, the hashtag #MeToo had been used on Twitter over 200,000 times. Within a year, it had been used 19 million times. If someone was to trivialize any one of these stories and say, that's your truth, but the abuser's truth is that it wasn't abuse at all, you and I would be horrified, disgusted even. We know that injustice done to us or to our friends are really real and really wrong. We know that bigotry might be accepted by a community, but that it's still bigotry and it's still wrong. We know that the powerful taking advantage of the weak is corrupt and even evil, because we believe that human worth is of intrinsic value. But the academic naturalistic worldview, the atheistic worldview, is unable to truly condemn evil. Is there any significant difference between me looking for the missing child and a kid looking for their lost toy? Richard Dawkins and other atheist professors, such as the eminent political scientist John Rawls, again, Kai Nielsen, and others, Steven Pinker, they're left with this question of why do we act as human beings and as a society as if human suffering matters? Why do we act as if human beings have inherent objective worth if it is just a matter of personal preference? They offer a number of theories, and in my longer version of the talk, I get into them, but I'll just summarize them all by saying that they say that the reason we act this way is just egotistical self-interest. If I want to live in a society where I'm protected from human traffickers, if I'm going to be rescued, if I'm kidnapped, then I'm going to maybe go and fight for a society that rescues people, that I'm going to maybe look for this lost child in case if I get lost. And I kind of want a quid pro quo relationship to society and the law. But as I thought through their answers to this question, I thought, what if that's the case? I don't want to flatter myself. I don't want to present myself as some hero. What if there was some egotistical self-interest in my looking for Kayla? Maybe I wanted a story. I'm a speaker. Maybe I wanted a story that I can tell that opens with a riveting, wintry, cold day. And I think I'd be lying to myself and certainly to you if I said that there's nothing egotistical, selfish, or arrogant about me. It's possible that these guys are right about me. But what about other situations? My friend Brian McConaughey, I know some of you know him, works with victims of brothels in Cambodia. These victims have been rescued from a horror of being raped by about 20 different people a night. It's his charity's job to help restore and rebuild their lives after the rescue. The people he works with, listen, the people he works with are as young as 4 and 5 years old. Is the abuse of these children truly immoral, even evil? Is their suffering real and really wrong? Or, as Dawkins would say, is calling their suffering evil just a matter of personal preference? Is it subjective? Is their rescue and restoration really good, intrinsically good? How much is a little boy worth? How much is a little girl worth? That question was made famous by Rachel Den Hollander to the judge, jury, and to every one of us throughout the world watching Dr. Larry Nassar's trial. I think it was 2018. Dr. Larry was the doctor for the American Olympic gymnast team. Rachel was the first woman to publicly accuse him of sexual abuse, and the last of more than 150 women and girls to confront him in court during the sentencing. He was convicted for sexually abusing more than 300 women and girls, and also for countless use of child pornography, a whole bunch of really exploitive, degrading, abusive stuff. The answer we want to give to the question, what is a little girl worth, is that a little girl or boy has intrinsic value, infinite worth. But does our philosophy or worldview enable us to honestly say that? Rachel Den Hollander wrote in a children's book for her own daughters, a response to her own question, what is a girl worth? I'm going to read you just a little snippet from this beautiful book. She wrote in this picture book, you are worth fighting for, worth standing alone for, worth whatever it takes for your worth to be shown. Your value is found not in what you can do or the things you accomplish and win. Your worth cannot fade. It will not go away. It is not changed a bit by what happens today. No one and nothing can make you worth less, end quote. This view resonates in our souls, but that doesn't make it true. Perhaps one might say the fact that it resonates is what makes it subjectively true. And that's all we need. But when we need to hold on to the truth, the answer to the question, what is a human worth? It's precisely in those times where it doesn't resonate in our soul. It's precisely when this truth does not resonate in our soul that we need to be able to know that it's an objective truth. It's when I don't feel like, when I don't feel like treating women with dignity and respect, that I need to remember as a man that she is of inherent worth. It's when I want to give up looking for a lost girl because I have a plane to catch, that I need to remember that she is worth looking for until we find her. And perhaps even most importantly, for Kayla and every one of us who is hurting, we all need to remember when we feel like trash, that you are of such esteemed value, infinite worth, that nothing you've been through, nothing you've done, no mistake you've ever done, and nothing horrible or criminal that someone has ever done to you can make you worth less. Dawkins, Nielsen, and Rawls are unable to provide an objective standard of good and evil, and an objective answer to the question of human worth. But Rachel Denhollander finds one in the person and the scars of Jesus. Rachel stated in court to the judge and jury and every one of us, she wrote this, or rather stated this, I quote, "Throughout this process, I've clung to a quote by C.S. Lewis, where he says, 'My argument against God for years was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how did I get this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he first has some idea of straight. What was I comparing the universe to when I called it unjust?' Rachel continued, 'Larry, I can call what you did evil and wicked because it was. And I know it was evil and wicked because the straight line exists. The straight line is not measured based on your perception or anyone else's perception. And this means I can speak the truth about my abuse without minimization or mitigation. And I can call it evil because I know what goodness is. And this is why I pity you. Because when a person loses the ability to define good and evil, when they cannot define evil, they can no longer define and enjoy what is truly good." End quote. See, Rachel found an objective standard of beauty, justice, and value. She believes the scriptures, the Bible, what Christianity teaches us, that God has infused human beings with his image, nobility, and royal divinity. When people violate other people, therefore, they're transgressing something sacred. When innocent blood is shed, this God can hear it crying out from the ground, crying out for justice. Sexual assault or kidnapping a child isn't simply wrong because society deems it so, but because that child has inherent objective value, infinite worth. Now, is Rachel's view of the world, is Christianity true? I remember a conversation I had with a really sweet friend of mine in university. He and I had a lot of the same classes in philosophy and history in our undergrads. And I remember that he started university as an aggressive atheist. Perhaps some of us watching would identify as aggressive atheists. Well, he was one. And through our different classes in the first 2 years of university, we would always be discussing these questions of evil, suffering, and the existence of God. And one day he said to me, "Daniel," that's my name. He said, "Daniel, I've become a theistic agnostic." Intrigued, I asked him to tell me more. And he said, "Well, it's because of this question of suffering." He said, "See, I know, I'm kidding myself if I say I don't. I know that evil and suffering are real. They're really real and really wrong." He said, "If evil is real, then so also must be good. There must be two different categories. If evil is real, so is good." He said, if there's some way to differentiate between the two, then there must be a moral law, something that separates evil and good. And if there's a moral law, like with any law, there must be a moral law giver. And it's that being, the moral law giver, that's kind of bigger than the universe, outside of the material world, that we would call God, that divine being." And he said, "That's why I'm a theist. I believe in God." And then he said, "But I'm a theistic agnostic because that being, that be outside of the universe, bigger than all the reality, that can make that moral law that runs right through nature and all of reality." He said, "That being is infinite. We're finite. So we could never know what that being is or understand him fully because we're small and he's so huge. So therefore, I'm a theistic agnostic. I believe there must be a God. I can just never know who he or she is." I agree with him. I can feel Pastor James getting worried right now. Who invited Daniel to speak tonight? No, I agree with him. I agree with him that he's right, that we can never grasp that divine being unless that divine being chose to condescend itself to reveal himself to us. Because you tell me what's impossible for a God who can do anything to do. What's impossible for someone to do anything? Nothing. He can literally do anything. And that's precisely the claim of the Bible, that God has condescended himself, has chosen to reveal himself to us fickle, finite human beings. It's impossible to know God unless he reveals himself to us. And one of the stunning things about Christianity is that God has chosen to do this in a falsifiable way, meaning that at the heart of Christianity is not a moral code, nor is it a new way of thinking or philosophy. That's not really what Christianity is about. The center of Christianity is a falsifiable claim, meaning that you can use the tools of historical inquiry. You can use your mind to look and see, is this trustworthy? Is it rational to believe in this? You can actually prove Christianity false. Because at the heart of Christianity is an event, the death and resurrection of Jesus. Christianity, the claim is that God himself has made himself a human being, Jesus, God the Son of God, and that he died on the cross, taking all the wickedness and suffering and shame and pain that every one of us has ever experienced or done to others. He took it on himself, that he died, and then he did the impossible. He climbed out of the grave. He came back to life. Now that sounds wild. I generally would not believe if someone said, hey, this guy just came back to life. I'm like, well, dead people don't come back to life. But he did it in a public way. So the reason that I, who am just very naturally very skeptical about things I hear, have become convinced that this is true, is that there are eyewitness accounts. There are hostile eyewitnesses, people who had everything to lose by saying that Jesus came back from the dead. And as a historian, my degrees, my graduate studies are all in history. You pay a lot of attention to eyewitnesses, hostile sources, unlikely sources no one would quote or fabricate if they're making a story. We have such incredible evidence that this is actually what happened, that Jesus came back from the grave. Secondly, the Bible stands tall in its elegance as a sacred book. It's not like the other so-called holy books. It's not written by one man, which so many of the other ones are. It's written actually by such a diversity, 40 different people, some in poverty, others in palaces, some in prison, others in the wilderness, in 3 different continents, in 3 different languages, but one coherent story. And if you were in a court of law trying to figure out what happened, or you're a journalist trying to figure out what happened, you would be listening to a diversity, a multiplicity of voices are all saying, who didn't get a chance to collaborate. But if they're sharing a coherent story, though they didn't collaborate, you put a lot more attention to that than what one man said. The Bible stands tall in its elegance. If Jesus is who he says he is, then the universe isn't blind and pitiless, but rather held by God with nailed, scarred hands. When Jesus died on the cross, his blood cried out from the ground, not simply for justice, but for redemption. If the worth of something is defined by how much someone will pay for it, then the Christian claim is that every woman, man, boy, and girl is worth God's own life. I remember the moment that I came around the corner and Kayla and my eyes met. Miracle of miracles. She ran into my arms. I can remember that moment that I felt her both shivering so much, but also relaxed. She was finally safe. Some of you tuning in tonight on YouTube and Facebook have been wrestling for some time with the questions of God. Is a Christian claim of who God is? Is Jesus' own words about himself, are they true? Is he really God and Savior, our Savior? Some of you wrestled with the evidence, and you kind of want to keep wrestling with it, but you actually know that it's true, that's legitimately true. I want to invite you to, just like Kayla threw herself into my arms, so also tonight, would you actually just throw yourself into God's arms by just saying a prayer, something like, God, I want you to be my God. I want you to be my rescuer. Commit myself to you. Would you ask him for the forgiveness for your sin and for healing from your shame? You'll find that in such a more meaningful way than Kayla did that evening, that it's not only the safest thing you could do, it's actually the path of rescue. Still others are probably still needing to wrestle, and I'd love to just wrestle with you through these questions tonight. Don't just take it because of my word. Investigate it yourself. Ask us your tough questions, comment below. But still others, and probably the majority of people tuning in tonight, are actually tracking with everything Alonzo and myself have said tonight. You're just loving all the different stuff we're saying about Christianity and God, because that's totally what you believe. But I need to challenge you, because I need to challenge myself. It's so easy for us, no matter how devout we might be in any season of our lives, to kind of fall back, especially in a time of fear, into living in our own comfort zone, to living in a circle of our own safety, especially with a time like this, COVID-19. It's so easy for us to just look out for our own well-being. But I want to challenge you that Jesus never called people just to believe truth about Jesus. He calls us to follow him, to step outside of our comfort zone and join him in bringing rescue and bringing his message of hope and helping receive his kingdom into this broken world. So I want to challenge you tonight afresh to commit yourself to living out love loudly in our lifetime, in humility and grace. Because how much is a girl worth? How much are you worth? According to Jesus' scars, everything. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're just getting started. We're going to transition to Q&A. The first question comes from, I'm not sure what city they asked this from, but they are asking, did Adam and Eve have a belly button? Alonzo, over to you.
First of all, thank you for the question. It's so deep and profound. I don't think that Adam and Eve had a belly button, but there's no way for us to say conclusively one way or another if they had a belly button. But if you're really interested, this is something I've actually just been watching recently, is a guy named Dr. William Lane Craig. He's a philosopher out of the States, and he is doing a ton of work with some other scientists on the historical Adam and Eve. And they think that they were real people, and there's a great case for our common ancestry. So I'm no expert in it. Check out Dr. William Lane Craig if this is like a burning question for you, or if you're really interested in it. I think you'll be really helpful. But great question.
Thanks, Alonzo. I think, James, we're ready for the next question.
What do you think, Daniel? Just as James is getting ready, do you think
I
belly button or no belly button?
About Christianity is one of the things I love about Jesus is that he invites us to love him with our minds, but he lets there be a lot of freedom for us to wrestle with the big questions of life and the small questions. And I'll let you decide, those watching, whether or not the belly button question is like a big question or a small one. But either way, I know this, that there is about 99 speakers on our team all over the world wrestling with big questions and open forums and such, like tonight. And there's probably disagreement on the team as to whether or not Adam and Eve had a belly button. And there's big, even bigger questions about Adam and Eve and creation of the world. But I know that our team is able to wrestle with it, and you can wrestle with it, come to your own conclusion, and God welcomes us into questions and differences. So yeah, that's a non-answer. I used to work in politics, right?
That was good.
Thanks, man. That's such a good question. So I'll repeat it. And if people at any point hear Pastor James's questions, then please let us know below so I don't have to waste your time repeating. So the question, if I understood correctly, was, might it seem that this girl, Kayla, actually means more to us than God because we are trying to like stop the abuse, and sometimes it seems as if God's letting it happen? That's such a good question. I'm so with you. There's no question that has so rattled my own faith and my journey in faith as much as the question of the problem of evil. And part of it was because I was working directly on these questions, not questions, but directly with victims of sex trafficking and on these issues of Parliament Hill. And there's just times where our hearts cry out, God, how could you let this happen? And I've literally prayed. I remember one time, I'll spare all the details, but driving back from the hospital, this guy who had been homeless on the streets for years, to become a friend, was dying in the hospital. He was like 22. And I just remember I was driving to go preach at a church. I was punching the steering wheel, tears come down my eyes, just like, God, like I was literally asking what you're asking, Ron. I was saying, God, like I feel like I love this young man more than you. Like, God, like what gives? And I was very upset. The Psalms in the Bible, Psalm 88 and many others, Psalm 22, show us that we can actually pray these types of raw prayers to God. Over the years, as I was trying to help a number of people through really tough stuff, I found that there's only so much that I'm able to do, and there's only so much charities, even like Brian McConaughey's and others are able to do. And yet Brian, who's working even more directly with devastating circumstances than me, has so many beautiful stories, absolutely heart-stopping, like just the most inspiring stories of people whose lives have been crushed, being able to kind of climb out of the grave, like be able to live such healthy, whole lives. And Brian, and in fact, even more than Brian, the very people he's working with many of them, if not all, would say that the power for their restoration, for their rescue, for their lives being rebuilt is actually found in Jesus. And so I really have come to see that what Alonzo was saying in his talk, in his 18 minutes, is so true, that like God is actually able to be with us in pain. That God is able to even like take a horrible thing and turn it into something beautiful. Alonzo and I were chatting about this because we still wrestle with these questions, and he was reminding me of this Japanese art form where they take like bowls and such dishes that are fairly, they cost something, and when they're smashed, there's this style of art where they'll like glue it back together with gold. And those rebuilt bowls are so much more expensive. They're worth so much more than the ones that have never been broken. And when I think of as the most inspiring people I know, it's often people who have been through, honestly, a lot worse than me. The Bible in 2 Corinthians 1 says that we comfort others with the comfort we ourselves receive. And there's just many ways that these people who've been through so much worse than me are actually able to make such a more extraordinary impact. From my perspective, my limited infinite wisdom, I would have kept them from ever going through anything. But it seems to me that God is wiser than me, and that when he is allowing something that's so painful, it's that it's not because he's indifferent to their well-being, but because he actually loves them and believes in their call even more than I do. I hope some of that makes sense. Alonzo, please join in.
Yeah, I would love to speak into this. So I think, Daniel, you just so beautifully unpacked that and responded to that. If I was to contribute a little bit to that for some of us that are continuing to think about it very deeply, and rightfully so, is that there's this redemptive power and restorative power in God, in the gospel, in the person of Jesus Christ, that I just have not come across anywhere else. And this is really interesting. So I have a good friend back in Oxford. His name is Tom Terrence. Actually, he lives now in the States, but he would come and give us lectures in Oxford. And he's probably one of the most kindest, gentlest people that I know. And he would always walk the halls in this Southern twang. You know, he'd say, "Hey, brother," that sort of thing. You know, that's deep South American sort of accent. And so he would come to us, and he has an interesting story, not from the victim's perspective, but from the victimizer's perspective. So what Daniel was just describing, and what I've had in my own life, just being a victim of evil and suffering and experiencing the traumatic effects of that. But it's also interesting to see the perspective of the victimizer and how God can restore that individual. So my friend Tom Terrence that I was just describing, he actually, back in the day, must have been in the 50s or so, maybe perhaps the 60s, was a KKK terrorist. He went on a bombing campaign throughout Mississippi and earned himself the title, the most dangerous man in Mississippi. Now, this is not a trivial thing. He was so dangerous that the American government, the president himself, allocated an entire task force in order to capture and bring to justice Tom Terrence. He even made a movie about him. First time I took a picture with him and posted it on Facebook, my dad said to me, "Why are you with this terrorist? Don't you know who this is?" And so his story is that he went out one day on one of his bombing campaigns, and luckily, fortunately, it was not successful. The FBI and the police captured him, caught up with him, not before putting two shotgun shells into him. And that'll stop you, anyone that's running away from the police. And as he's doing that, they capture him, they throw him in jail. You know, he gets tried and found guilty. Now, in jail, somebody gives him a Bible. And he starts reading about Jesus Christ in the Gospels. The Gospels are the biographies of Jesus. And as he's reading this thing, some miraculous thing happens. He finds that he has this profound realization of him hurting other people, the sin that's in his own life, and his need for grace and forgiveness. And this radically transforms him as he reads the gospel and finds out that God even loves people like him and is willing to reach out, restore that person. So he does that. He receives Jesus and is utterly transformed. He is so transformed, in fact, the FBI agent that apprehended him gets converted some years later into his sentence because they see such a dramatic change in Tom Terrence. So as that happens, he ends up converting nearly his whole cell block in jail. And after a number of years of serving his sentence, a long, long time, they eventually let him out on good behavior. And nowadays, like I said before, this is the most incredible and kind person I've ever come across. And he recently just wrote a book, and you can find it on Amazon or rzim.org or .ca. And it's this. And this title of this book summarizes his entire life. And it's this: consumed by hate, redeemed by love. So not only does God have this transformative, restorative power to him for the victim, but God's redemption is so broad and wide and healthy and resourced that he can also transform the lives of the guilty, of the victimizers. And that's an important component because you know what? We've all been victimized by stuff, but we also have we've all been victimizers of other people in some sort of way. So I think that that's an important component to responding to the question. And I hope that adds additional clarity and depth to the response.
Before moving on, Ron, this is such a good question. I just want to take another moment on that. And that is to say that I so resonate with this question. Like, doesn't it seem that we humans care so much more about people than God cares? But there's actually something about this story that we might have missed, or the situation. I'd shared this story at an event I was at. I was speaking every night for a few hours each night that week. And I shared this as the opening part of that story, the first night. And then we got into the stuff the rest of the week. And all week long, people were saying, hey, can you finish the story? You just left us hanging. Did you find her? Did you not? And on the final day, I finished the story about how we found her. And she was rescued. But to be honest, I almost didn't finish the story. And that's because when I finish a story with you at the end of my talk, it lets us be able to just kind of go on with our day. Hey, it's resolved, happy. But this haunts me. There are so many more children just like Kayla on the streets, not just on nights like tonight, but in the middle of the horrific, haunting autumn winters. And if you listen to the story, I know you did, that I'm sure you saw, it took us a few hours, but we found her. And that helps me see that there are enough like kind-hearted people in Ottawa that I think we probably could rescue all the kids in the missing child posters. And most of them are still on the streets. There's so many kids. There's so many, not just kids, but people of so many ages all throughout the world who are being victims of injustice. And though we can do something about it, most people don't. It's a part I also removed from my talk tonight for the sake of time, but in the longer version, I talk about the reality of pornography. If we're talking about human trafficking and such things, you got to talk about porn. 88% of mainstream online porn contains violence against women. It's not acting. It's not like a movie where they're pretending. This is real violence against women. There's a story I'd share in more detail about a woman that I got to hear her story personally, who was she was sexually assaulted. It was filmed. It was put online as porn, and she ended up meeting someone who had seen that, and they like talked to her as if this was like some like a play or something like like as if she was an actress, and they didn't realize that they had watched this woman's sexual abuse because it was uploaded to the internet as mainstream porn. So much of porn is that content. The reason I share this is that we say to ourselves, oh yeah, like we value people and we even value people more than God. But if we're honest, both non-Christians and Christians, people of faith and people without any faith, we are perpetuating horrific, intimate, exploitive abuse. And so many of the people I've met, including myself, who have given our time and our energy and sacrifice to try to help people to act as if people are worth rescuing. Why are we doing that? Why do I know so many guys and girls, people like myself, who refuse to watch porn, refuse completely, no matter how alluring it might feel or be? Why do we refuse? It's not just because we're like, oh yeah, we think we should. In fact, I've helped a number of people personally. I've gone to walk with who like think they shouldn't watch porn, but then they're still watching porn, and eventually they're able to get this habit out of their life. And I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for so many that I've had the privilege of walking with. It was as the love of God shone in their heart and began to transform them, that they were able to stop being a perpetuator of these things by consuming porn and begin being someone who's actually helping make a difference. So it really seems to me, I know we're spending a lot of time on this one question, but it matters that the valuing of human beings. The laws we have in Canada that say that you can't do the stuff that's happening in Cambodia. I know abuse happens in Canada, but it's illegal, and our law enforcement are trying to rescue. There are countries around the world today where, even though it might be illegal, like the law enforcement are actually perpetuating this stuff. They're not rescuing victims. And the reason that Canada and some other countries around the world have beautiful laws is because it's actually founded on the very principles that flow from the Bible, including Leviticus. And so, yeah, thank you so much for your question. Thanks for everyone's patience as we really spent time on this. There's another question has been messaged into me. This one's anonymous. It's a really good question. I'll just read it. How can I, as a Christian, reach into the suffering of an unbeliever that I have not experienced and can't rightly claim to understand? So our hope is in Jesus there, right? So what can I say to someone who doesn't believe in him? Well, Alonzo, do you want to take the first crack at it?
Yeah, sure. That's a really wonderful question. How do I show this love to somebody that's not a follower of Jesus Christ? And I think the way that I would sort of frame this response is I would do exactly what Jesus does when he comes across people that don't believe in him. He acts with extraordinary compassion. He is a master of the art of listening. He engages where people are at. He asks questions. And it's not like a trivial sort of, empty question and I'm just asking it for the sake of asking it. He's seriously taking an interest in somebody and seriously listening to what they have to say and where they are at on their journey. Then he selects the right time in order to engage. And from my experience, that's been the best way of doing it. I had mentioned in my talk, my wife, her name is Khadija. She comes from an Islamic home. And it's actually half Islamic on her dad's side, and on her mom's side, it's Punjabi. So they're a denomination of Sikhism. And so we have this wide variety, this pluralistic home, this quintessentially pluralistic home at her house. Her brother is, in fact, a non-believer in God. And so, which makes grace very interesting time at, family dinners and things when you have that sort of different worldviews all in the same place. But here's been my experience. Is when I'm speaking with somebody that does not agree fundamentally with how I view the world, like with my worldview, then I recognize first that people's beliefs are so precious to them. And the worst and most uncourteous thing that I can do is just simply tear them down. So I try to implement in my own life when I'm speaking to lots of my friends and my family that don't believe in Jesus, and maybe they're hurting, that I'm speaking with them in that same sort of compassion, asking lots and lots of questions. And once I get the right time, then I can say, you know what's really helped me in my life? I've drawn on Jesus Christ to help me, to comfort me. Now that requires a couple of things. First thing, that requires that you yourself are drawing on Jesus for your comfort and for your strength, so that you can speak from a position of authenticity towards your friend, and as you're giving him a possibility of finding Jesus as a resource for their comfort and strength during their time of suffering. And then the second thing is this, and we always have to remember this, which comes from the lips of the Apostle Peter, and it comes from 1 Peter 3:15. The verse says that always be ready to give a response for the hope that you have. Now, I love it when Daniel always reminds me that verse just assumes that you're having conversations with people, that you've been asked a question. We should do far more listening when we're engaging with our friends, especially if they're suffering. The Bible doesn't say to give them, your whole, treatise on why suffering occurs. It says, weep with those that weep, to ask questions and to listen. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ did. But also the second part of the verse is that we respond with gentleness and respect, that we acknowledge what Daniel has been so eloquently describing, that this person is intrinsically valuable, that there's a dignity on this person, that they are valuable and they're worth listening to. And the Bible commands those who follow Jesus to cordially, respectfully, gently engage with this person where they are at on their journey. So that would be some of my preliminary thoughts. If you're looking for real pragmatics, you can make sure you take them out for a nice curry, a nice meal. That always gets people opening up, and you can share and just love on them and be charitable towards them. I always find a nice meal always warms me up for a good conversation. And especially my friends that don't know Jesus, I'm going to buy them some chicken wings or some hot curry, and we're going to have a good time. And I'm just going to be a friend for the long run. I'm not going to try and just do things, very quickly. I'm going to try and be there for the long run and be for that person, Jesus Christ, with skin on. I'm going to be that representative of Jesus, and I'm going to love him in the same way that Jesus loves us.
Thank you so much, Alonzo. That's so good. Yeah, I love everything Alonzo said. I have virtually nothing to add except to say that I find that when people are hurting, they often, no matter how aggressively they might be against faith, really do appreciate knowing that you're praying for them. It's really remarkable to me how true that is. And so I want to just encourage you to not feel like you can't mention anything about Jesus to someone who doesn't believe in him. I have some friends who are just aggressively non-Christians, and yet when life hurts, it's the only time that they're happy to hear me just say like, hey, I'm praying for you. I noticed that, I'll share a little bit more when we move to the next question. Sam in Moncton, we're gonna go to your question next, I believe. And then Devin's question from Wilmot. And hello to Sarah watching from Hong Kong. You must have just woken up because it's very early there, but back to the point. You'll notice as you read through the eyewitness accounts of Jesus, the historical biographies we have of Jesus, that often when someone comes to him who's sick or hurting, Jesus takes them aside and that he actually meets them right where they're at. Another person who's hurting in the Bible is Elijah, a famous preacher. He is actually like suicidal, it seems, or at least wanting to die. And God's response to Elijah's pain isn't to just preach at him, which I love preaching to and at people, I'll be honest. But God doesn't do that. Instead, he actually has his angel bake him some like oat cakes on some stones. It's very earthy. And I wonder why it's such an earthy moment. Like why it has to be like oat cakes and it's not just like some divine dew from heaven. But he like cooks some oat on some like stones. I think it shows us that God cares about people's pain and that he wants to meet them where they're at. And so when someone is even asking some real tough questions, but we're not actually like looking for an academic, philosophical, even religious answer. We're just looking for, is anyone with me? And so you're taking the time to listen. I think sometimes the most powerful words are just, I'm so sorry. Tell me more. And listen. And then at the same time, we don't want to only listen. We do want people to know that there is a living hope that's found in the scars of Jesus, that he understands our pain. So I want to encourage you, be praying for them, let them know you're praying for them, listen, and look for opportunities to share a little bit of the reality of God in our lives. But I'm literally just repeating the stuff Alonzo said. Such a good answer from him. The next question comes from Sam in Moncton. Pull it up here. I know some of you are judging me right now. You're like, why, Daniel, are you looking down and at your phone while Alonzo's talking? It's because I'm having to jump in here and ask questions because Pastor James's mic isn't working. Not making excuses. So Sam in Moncton asks, how can we be sure the Bible is accurate? That's a great question.
Yeah. Let me jump in on this.
Yeah, hit it up, bro.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. And I think my personal interest for this was birthed out of coming to Christ in my 20s. I came from a nominal Catholic background. That's a casual Catholic, sort of speak. It was more fire insurance than anything. You know, you would go there on Christmas and Easter just in case there was a God. You know, he'd be less angry with you if you put in a little bit of time with him. And that was the depth, really, of my spiritual life, if you could even call it a spiritual life. So that's when, after my parents got divorced, that's when I got into drugs and did that for a number of years. I was an opiate addict. And eventually at 21, I got invited to church. It was actually my sister that invited my brother and I, my brother that passed away. And we are so thankful and so grateful that they did that. So when it came to the Bible, I really wanted to dig into this thing. Coming from somebody that had no sort of overt objections to it, I came and just, first of all, noticed and paused by how beautifully it was written and how it seemed to have this sort of capacity of speaking right to me in the time that I need it. So I wanted to take this thing seriously. So some people approach this, first of all, they want to look at the reasons and the arguments and the evidence, and then they will read it and trust it. I came from it from the other side. I was desperate. I was hopeless. I was broken. I felt unloved, and I desperately needed a lifeline, and I found that lifeline in Jesus Christ. So when I did come to the evidence side of things, because I wanted to, really trust this and not be somehow hoodwinked or believe something that's just false, I looked at 5 particular areas, and this will be really helpful for you. And a really helpful resource, if you're curious about this, is my boss. Her name is Amy Orr Ewing. She has a PhD from Oxford University. She's on our Oxford team. She's the leader over there, the boss over there, that sort of thing. And she wrote a book that is so helpful, and it's entitled Why Trust the Bible. And I encourage you to pick that up on Amazon or RZIM or wherever. And if you go on YouTube, she has a whole bunch of talks as well on this particular subject. But let me just, before I digress too much, 5 things that I think about when I'm thinking about how can I trust the Bible. And I have to race through them quickly. If you need a point of clarification, just comment below or send in another question. I look at palaces, papyrus, places, people, and power. So that's palaces, papyrus, places, people, power. And so what does that mean? Well, the first one is palaces. Any piece of literature that has survived 2,000 years. Like, just think about that for a minute. So suppose you wanted to try and write a book. How long would that book be around for? It's always a scary thing to go into one of these really big old libraries and find these books that were written by somebody that was an all-star in their generation 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and nobody has read it ever since. However, by contrast, the Bible is a book that has survived entire kingdoms. Literally, iron and brick have come and have gone, but the Bible has remained. It has outlasted palaces, kingdoms, and empires. And any book that has that sort of longevity to it, I think you owe it to yourself to read it, at least starting with the gospel, one of the biographies of Jesus. So that's, for me, that should cause anyone to stop and pause. The second one is papyrus. This is one of my favorites. Now, I had the privilege of sitting in some lectures in Oxford under a guy named Dr. John Dixon from Macquarie University in Australia. That was my very poor attempt at an Australian accent. I won't try that again. But he is a world-renowned scholar in this, an authority. And you can Google him, Dr. John Dixon. He also just came out with another book, Is Jesus History? I encourage you to pick that up. But one of the things that he explained to us is, oftentimes we hear in our culture that you can't trust this Bible. It's outdated, it's been corrupted, and all these sorts of things. It's been changed. That is actually false. And he would always say to us and always remind us, skeptics may rule the headlines, but not the academy. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence that corroborates that the New Testament has not been changed since it was originally written down. That the nearly 24,000 pieces of evidence that we have, that would include three different subcategories: full manuscripts of the New Testament, particular books, and then fragments. It's 23,986 pieces of evidence that we have that corroborates the fact that you can buy on Amazon right now a New Testament, a Bible, and you could go to one of these museums like the British Museum, which I've been to, and look at the oldest manuscripts that we have, and it is word for word the same. Scholars remind us that there's 130,000 different textual variations, and sometimes we get these people like Bart Ehrman that throw that in the face of Christians, say, hey, look at all of these variations amongst the different manuscripts. That, again, is no surprise to scholars. If you look at your Bible in all of the margins, they have them all marked down. Out of the 130,000 textual variances, about none of them, about 1,400 are outside of just minor grammatical errors. That's less than 1% that they're just not quite sure about, but none of them out of the 130,000 affect the core message. They have just changing of words, but they're insignificant, they're trivial words. And so all you have is that you have this mountain of evidence that's very, very reliable. Number 3 and number 4 is places and people. The places and people that the Bible talks about are actual historical people and actual historical places. You can go to museums like the British Museum, which I mentioned earlier, and see the artifacts, the archaeology that is there. It was Craig Evans that wrote, if there was no such thing as archaeological evidence to corroborate the Bible, we wouldn't have the discipline of biblical archaeology, but we do have it. It's something you can study. And there's a ton of evidence that, hey, this real place was really there, and these real people really existed in history. And we know both of those facts outside of the Bible, and the Bible, every time it records it, just seems to be corroborating what we know from outside of it. So you have a very strong case that this is a reliable document. And the last one, and again, if any of these are unclear, I'd be delighted to go in more depth. But the last one is power, and this is very, very important. The last one is power. For millions and millions of people over the past 2,000 years have picked up this book and have had their lives transformed. I can speak from my own experience, but I can also look at all of the millions of other, you could call them case studies, of these people that have had some sort of transformative experience, this power that they felt that comes from the Word of God itself. And that is exactly what you would expect to find if this is indeed the Word of God. And that's a lot of evidence. You would have to discredit and disprove all of those millions of people over those 2,000 years. They have shaped cultures, nations, institutions. My own institution, Oxford University, still has the motto, Domines illuminatio mei, the Lord is our light. It has literally transformed almost every aspect of our culture and world. And again, that's what you would expect to find if God's word is really God's word. So those are my five things very quickly. I hope that helps. Pick up Amy Orr Ewing's book. She's awesome, and I think you'll find her book really helpful.
Thanks so much, Alonzo. We're going to move into phase 2 of the question and answer time. It's going to be a lot faster questions. So Alonzo and I might still jump in and out, but we're going to be we might both answer, but we're going to be trying to be a lot more succinct. So value the time we've been able to have in phase 1. Phase 2, the questions are pouring in. So we're going to go a little faster. Here is a question from Jason. He asks, can a Christian lose salvation? There is a lot that's been written on this, so I'm just going to be very quick. The people who ask this question, every one of them is someone who still has breath in their lungs. And I know as someone myself who has wondered at times in my life, like, have I lost my salvation? Have I strayed too far from God? And there's times in our life where we feel shame or we're wondering, like, not just can Christians lose their salvation, but have I lost my salvation? I think of examples in the Bible such as Peter, who denied Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times at Jesus' most critical moment. And Jesus speaks so ferociously about the grievous sin of denying him. Peter did not only do it once, but twice, 3 times. And yet Jesus invites him back. Jesus not only invites him back, that would be enough for me. He forgives him, that'd be enough for me, but he actually gives him a sacred call. That Jesus doesn't just like kind of just let him in, but we'll pretend like nothing happened. No, Jesus invites him close, invites him into back into his embrace, and commissions him to serve him in mighty ways. And so I don't know if the one asking this question or anyone else maybe who even that question resonates with and is wondering, might I have done things that have caused me to lose my salvation? I want you to know that the story of the prodigal son is actually primarily about the Father, not the Son. The point of the prodigal son, the Father invites every one of us back in. And so if there's still breath in your lungs, if there's still a little flicker of life in your thumbs, you can type out this question. Know that wherever you are, whatever you've done, Jesus's blood can wash away your sin. Not only have I worked with victims of sex trafficking, I've actually had the privilege of coming alongside people who have done horrific things. I've helped people turn themselves into the police. More beautiful than the moment of seeing them turn themselves into the police, that was a beautiful moment, was to see them receive the love of Jesus afresh. Our sin is toxic, sin destroys, but sin is not more powerful than the blood of Jesus. So I hope that means something to you, and you can just, if you Google, can someone lose their salvation, RZIM, it's the ministry we work for, you'll find a lot more in-depth answer to that really important question. The next question comes from Devin. I believe this is Devin from Wilmot, and he says, in a time like this, how does God show love? I think he means in the time of COVID-19, perhaps. How does God show love? Alonzo, would you like to take a stab at that?
Oh, yeah. Devin, thank you so much and for asking that question. It's so profound and so needed. I think two things mainly, but it's definitely not limited to this. And the two things that I would say are solace and solidarity. And God shows us this love through solace and solidarity. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, solace means comfort. And the Holy Spirit is given us as believers, as followers of Jesus, as our comforter. That's what Jesus described him as. And so I think that our relationship with God personally is first and foremost how God shows us love during this time, being with us and strengthening us and comforting us in those times, so that, not just so that you can enjoy this love of God personally, but so that you can go and reflect it in the lives of other people. One of the most impactful lives that Christendom has ever seen is someone named Mother Teresa, that went to the poorest of the poor and dealt with all sorts of horrendous suffering. And she was convinced that Matthew 25 was her life verse, where Jesus talks about, hey, if you show love and comfort to the least of these, my brethren, my sisters, then you do it unto me. And she was a reflector of the Lord to broken people so that they can also receive the love and care and compassion of God. And then so I would say that that's solace, that's the comfort that God does for us personally so that we can reflect it to others. And then the second one is solidarity, that Christ, in those intimate moments that we have with him during our devotional time, our time that we spend in the word and in prayer and in worship, that we have this wonderful counselor that knows exactly what we've gone through and can minister to our scars and hurts and pains and love on us in a way that is unparalleled by any other being. So I think that that would be preliminary, my two sorts of things. And I guess just very pragmatically as well, like Mother Teresa, we can love people by staying at home and keeping our essential workers safe and healthy. We can love people by calling, texting, emailing, doing Zoom calls, all sorts of creative ways that we can show the love of God to people and reflect God's love to us, to them.
Thanks so much, Alonzo. Here's another one from Abby from Cambridge, I believe Ontario, which is not a disappointment. Not a disappointment. Cambridge,
not
Ontario,
a disappointment.
Is
not
really
a disappointment.
Special.
I thought it was one of my friends from Cambridge. That's why.
No, it's my friend from Abby from Cambridge. Abby, we're so glad you're here. And thank you, everyone. We're now at 90 minutes into this, and we're not done yet, so stay with us. There's a lot of good questions pouring in. Here's from Abby, Cambridge Abby. If we ourselves are hurting, how can we help and comfort people through more than prayer who are also hurting, or maybe more than people who are also hurting, without it becoming too much for us to handle? That's such an important question, Abby. So appreciate that question. There's a verse in 2 Timothy chapter 1 that Paul says something that's grammatically odd to me. He says, I'm convinced, he says, for I know whom I have believed, and I'm convinced that he is able to guard until that day what has been entrusted to me. Certain Bible translations try to fix the grammar because it's kind of odd, and they change it to, for I'm convinced that he will guard until that day what I've entrusted to him. But it actually reads, as far as I can understand, and the ESV and other many translations translate it grammatically correct, which is odd. I'm convinced that God will guard what's been entrusted to me. And this has been one of the most comforting verses to me when it comes to the privilege of walking in helping other people in their pain. Because when people entrust, when they're willing to be courageously vulnerable and trust their pain to us, it's a beautiful moment, but it's also heavy. Abby, you understand if you're asking this question, it's heavy. And then we have our own pain we're dealing with. And it's like this sacred burden we have, and it can weigh us down. And so I just take comfort that I've been entrusted with something and God will guard it. Ultimately, that means that like it's on his shoulders, even if it's been given to me. I just find comfort that the outcome, that them being able to transcend or rise above their circumstance, it's not ultimately on me, even though it's been entrusted to me, that God will guard it. I hope that makes sense. Other practical tips. Some years ago, I was on the Ottawa city bus. I used to live in that beautiful city, cold city. And on the bus, it was said the Ottawa Distress Center. It's like a suicide and stress line. And so I thought maybe I'll have a friend who needs it. So I took it down in my phone, because I thought typically when you need that number is not when you're going to have that number. So I have it on my phone. And sure enough, I was able to give it to other people who were suicidal or just really stressed out. And then I got to a place exactly where it sounds like you're coming from, Abby, where I had my own pain, and then other people were giving me their pain, and I was having really dark thoughts. And so before it got even worse, I called that suicide helpline, and that was as a pastor, someone that a lot of people looked up to and such. And I was able to let my church know, hey guys, even as your pastor, I'm calling the suicide helpline sometimes. I've called it twice. And I usually when we go speak, I'll give it out to the people I'm speaking to. I look it up for your city, but people are tuning in from Hong Kong, Cambridge, Ontario, and maybe Alonzo, the friend from Cambridge, England. So I'll just let you, it's so easy. Just Google your city's name or county's name. Just type in like Wilmot suicide distress, like helpline, and save it in your phone, and don't hesitate to call them. And then I find, just one last piece of advice, and then we'll go on to the next one, that I find that it's so liberating, so empowering when I'm able to tell others my pain. Often our lives are kind of emptied of strength when we're keeping our pain to ourselves. And some of you watching have been through so much more horrific stuff than me. And yet, as long as we keep it secret, what's been done to us, if we've been abused or neglected or something, and we're just keeping it secret, it seems like it kind of has a grip over us. But when we realize that it doesn't define us, we haven't done anything bad to someone else, they've done something bad, we haven't. Or in some cases, actually, as in the case of the guy who turned himself into the police, he had done something bad and he was keeping that a secret. I remember he confided in me, then we went public, went to the police, it ended up being public. And he called me from prison. And I'm not making this up, it sounds too poetical, but it's true. He called me up and he said, Daniel, I am more free today behind bars than I've ever been in my life, because he was free of the secret. So I want to encourage everybody watching to be honest with yourself tonight and throughout your life. Are there secrets? Are there sins or shame? Is there stuff others have done to you or you've done to others or to yourself that you're keeping secret? Might that be inhibiting your ability to be able to walk alongside other people in their pain, because your pain as a secret is too strong? I want to encourage you to find someone that you can trust, a parent or a pastor or just someone who's really mature, and be able to confide in them. I encourage people to reach out to professional counselors and be able to let them know what's happened, and to not let those things be secrets anymore. But more than anything, for us to be able to bring our pain to God and say, God, I just need to be real. There's these things that are really troubling, and letting people shoulder those burdens with us. And then finally, just to know your limits. Recently, there's someone I really, really respect, and I was asking if they might be able to walk with me on something, and they said no. And I just so respect them, because I don't typically ever want to say no to trying to help people. But this person who I respect for the impact they make in the world actually is like, hey, I have limits. And you and I, we want to live out love. We want to follow the Savior Jesus, the rescuer Jesus, but we're not Jesus. And that's profoundly liberating. Anyways, I'm monologuing again. Let's go to the next question. Thank you, Abby, so much for your question. I promise we go faster in this last round of questions. So let's go. Nelson writes, what should a Christian's role be in the world to defend the defenseless? Children in Yemen, ethnic cleansing in Africa, our role in war. Alonzo, do you mind if I jump into that?
I was just going to offer that to you. Yeah, this is your expertise.
I'm so passionate about this. So thank you. We are not the Savior, but we're following the Savior. Jesus never calls us to just believe in him, but he said, follow me. And what it means to follow Jesus, and one of the things it means is that we're to join him in what he's doing. And what is he doing? At the beginning of Jesus' itinerant ministry, he takes out an ancient scroll, it's Isaiah 61, I believe. He takes out the scroll, unrolls it, and reads, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to bring freedom to the captives, to restore dignity to those who don't have it. He continues on with these magnificent things. John, in the opening pages of the Gospel of John, as he introduces Jesus into the world, he summarizes Jesus' mission statement, even less words in Isaiah's prophecy. He describes everything Jesus is and does as light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You and I were made to be light shining in the darkness. You and I were made to not be okay with the things that are not okay. So that's your question. How do we do that? I just want to affirm, you're right to ask the question. We need to do that, but we're limited. So how do we do that? I think everybody is able to give 3 things. Let's start with 3, okay? We can give prayer. And in Proverbs 28, it says, many people seek the face of the ruler, but from the Lord comes justice. And so my wife and I, my siblings and I growing up, we take time on the daily to pray. I encourage you, you can't adopt all issues, but adopt a few. For me, one of the issues I really care about, and I kind of adopted as my own, is those children in the brothels in Cambodia. And so when I look at the time, I see right now, it's 8:08 p.m. It means it's 8:08 a.m. in Cambodia. These children have just finished a horrific night of abuse. And so I'll pray for them. And so I've researched their plight. I understand the charities that are part of it. So I'll pray for them by name. I want to encourage you, Nelson, and everyone watching, to be aggressively praying for the broken and the hurting and the lost throughout the world. Second, we can give our money. I know some of you are watching this and you're like, yo, there's a lot of youth watching this tonight. You're like, I don't got no money. You have some money. And you know what? If you don't, find someone else, maybe your parents, maybe Pastor James, and be like, hey, I want to raise a little bit of coin for this ministry. I've been part of some charities that rely completely on donations. And I know that when people donate even $2, you're just like, whoa, that's literally going to help us pay the bills. It's going to help us rescue more people. So give your money, even a little bit. And then third, give time. So give prayer, give your money, and give time. You can go volunteer. Any one of us can go volunteer. I have a friend who works the phones at one of those distress centers. Hey, Josiah, so proud of you. He literally receives the calls of people who are suicidal and helps them not commit suicide. There's so many different ways that you can make a difference. So give your time, and then okay, the fourth one is also prayer, but it's like prayer / your eyes. When I was a little kid, all my friends' dads had to take your child to work day. My dad's an incredible father, but he didn't take me to work with him. And I was a little kid. I just learned the Lord's Prayer. It's a famous prayer. And I sat on my bed. I didn't pray with a lot of faith, just a lot of frustration. I prayed, Heavenly Father, if you're really my father, can you ever take your child to work day? And I was just like a 5-year-old kid, legit. And then my church was doing some really sweet things, and I got to go be part of it. And in this really poor part of Surrey, BC, Wally, some of you know it. And I got, as a little kid, saw like, oh, this is a take your child to work day. And I've decided to keep praying that prayer. I try to pray it most days of my life. God, can you ever take your child to work day today? And as I pray that, it's been incredible for me to kind of have my expectations raised, my eyes open to how I can be light. And so, yeah, let's fight against injustice throughout the world. Let's try to make a difference. I encourage people to be engaged, even politically. Use our voice. We're in a democratic country. You can get involved and try to get better laws and all that kind of stuff. But also look for that person in school, back when we used to go to school in person, who no one wants to sit with, and go sit with them. You're going to be light in the darkness. Today, people can't hang out anymore. So think of someone who might be lonely and do something you haven't done for a long time, Nelson. Don't just text them, call them. What's up? Nelson, I actually don't know. You probably do call people. I know a lot of people are not calling people anymore. They just text. Some of the older people watching this are like, what? No, legit. Don't just text. Give them a call. Spend time. I'm monologuing again. Let's go to the next question. This comes from Kingsley. And he says, hello, guys. I have a friend who has been experiencing chronic pain in the lower back for quite some time now. And we have been praying and medicating, but the pain remains. So 2 questions. Do healings still happen today? And second, how can I give them encouragement as they go through pain?
Yeah, let me respond to this, because this is a tricky one, I think, when it comes to miracles and especially with healings. Let me just give you a bit of a backdrop. I came across an excellent scholar that you may want to actually research. His name is Craig Keener. He's a proper scholar. He has 2 volumes entitled Miracles. He's very well respected amongst academics. And I would encourage you to pick that up. But in his book, he records the fact that there are literally hundreds of millions of recorded cases where somebody has experienced something that they cannot attribute to a naturalistic explanation. Hundreds of millions of cases of this, verified. So to begin, I would say that there is far more, even if we were just to reduce that, he even says in the book, I wouldn't be so naive to think that all of these are accurate and true. Even a fraction of a fraction, even if it was 1 million out of the 200 plus million that he has recorded in his book, Miracles, even if it's just like 1 million or a fraction of that, there's far too much smoke here to say that there is no fire, that this absolutely does not occur. So me personally, I'm very intellectually persuaded that God is not restricted in his involvement and interactions within the material world. We see Jesus doing this everywhere that he goes. And what that was to represent was, these were signs pointing to the greater thing to come, which was the kingdom of God. And this was the preliminary sort of experience. So when it comes to praying for someone like your brother or a friend or whatever it was for a back thing that you've already tried to, I would suggest this to you because I've also experienced praying for my brother for cancer, and God did not heal him. And I know many Christians that have loved and faithfully served the Lord that have been prayed for and have not seen some sort of miracle. Do I have an answer for you? Absolutely not. There are certain things in God's universe that are beyond our capacity to understand. What he's called us to do is to pray for those people. You can think of James chapter 5. You can think of the Gospels where we're commanded to lay hands on the sick. Read the book of Acts. The whole thing is just brimming with the beginnings of Christendom, of praying for people and meeting real needs. So we are commanded to do that, so we obey God's word in doing that. But sometimes it does not happen. And there are many times within Scripture that God says, continue to pray, continue to intercede. Within a Christian theistic universe, there are all sorts of factors that are at play. Sometimes these things require fasting, like in the book of Daniel. Sometimes these things take a couple more people to be involved. And some of them, they just are outside of our cognitive, finite, limited cognitive ability to understand. But here's, for those sorts of cases where we feel like God does not hear our prayer, I want to say this one thing to you. One of the most important pieces of Scripture to me is the Garden of Gethsemane. And there, our Savior, the captain of our faith, knows exactly what it's like to pray and beseech God for something and it not working out the way that he was requesting. So when I see that, like the famous theologian Jürgen Moltmann, when he said he's seen this Garden of Gethsemane episode, he says, in this person, I see a divine brother, somebody that knows exactly what it means and exactly that sort of reality. And lastly, I would say this. is that when I cannot trace God's hand, I can trust God's heart. That when I don't see things working out the way that I think they should, I trust the good and loving and faithful God who is working to restore human beings and the world entirely.
Father,
I may not understand, but any God who would get himself nailed to a cross for my sake and for yours, I can trust that sort of person. That's why we call him the Wonderful Counselor. And so that would be a preliminary response. Keep praying for your friend for his back pain. You do not know what the Lord has in store. Maybe it requires a bit of fasting, and maybe it won't ever get healed. But we can trust him even in our pains. Paul himself prayed 3 times for his thorn to be removed out of the side of his flesh, and he didn't get it. And that's the Apostle Paul has in store. You know, he's a baller in the kingdom of God. You know what I mean? And so all of these things in consideration, I think we can find comfort in Jesus Christ, and we can trust his heart for you and your friend.
Alonzo, thank you so much. As you're speaking, it reminds me of a conversation we had the other day. That as we're talking about these questions, we were saying, you know, it's so beautiful that in response to the problem of evil, the question we're looking at tonight, the big question of tonight, why would a good God allow suffering? How does suffering disprove the existence of God? That Jesus doesn't ultimately give some academic philosophical answer. He doesn't give a syllogism as his answer to the problem of evil. He gave his life. That Jesus wasn't just trying to answer this up in some like pristine university setting, philosophizing, but he gave his life, which leaves me still with some questions. I kind of wish sometimes that Jesus answered the problem of evil in such a way that I can just fully understand it, explain it to anybody, how a good God could allow evil. But what we know is this, that because Jesus gave his life, and because he died to help answer the problem of evil, to help vanquish death, and then came out of the grave, that Jesus defeated death by his death and resurrection, that therefore physical pain, therefore even emotional brokenness, therefore our very death doesn't have the final word. I was a few years ago at a funeral, and I remember the pastor. It was such a sad funeral because it was these 5 children who had lost their mother to cancer, and I just remember the preacher. He's a Congolese pastor, it's a Congolese church, and I just remember his booming voice saying, "Death does not have the final word. Cancer does not have the final word over this woman's life. Jesus has the final word. That if Jesus is everything that he said he is, then the end of the story is not the end of the story. That even death, even when someone dies, you're like, God, how come you didn't heal them? We actually can put our trust, like Alonzo said, in the very heart of God. That because based on good evidence, we know that Jesus rose from the dead, and therefore he validated and vindicated the things he said about himself. We know that he is coming again. Alonzo said in his talk, he's coming again to wipe away our tears, and he will make the world right. And in actuality, the answer to every request for God to bring healing for all those who are his children is a resounding yes. It's just a question of timing. Sometimes he brings that healing on this side of eternity, but he will heal. He's going to give us resurrected bodies in real time, real space. It's going to be awesome. The next question. The next question is the coronavirus God's judgment on us? Some preachers have declared this.
You want me to start off with that one?
Sure. I feel like I was just monologuing.
Love to say something about that.
Man.
Is this God's judgment on humans or human wickedness or sin or any of these sorts of things? I would submit to this preacher that you may have heard of. And first of all, especially if you're somebody that doesn't know Jesus, I'm so sorry that someone said that to you. Sometimes what we hear from Christians is not very good and not in alignment with what we see in the Bible. Because, well, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I don't want to get off into a bunny trail, but I would say this. First of all, Jesus Christ is the fullness of God. He is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, and he is the exact image of God the Father in heaven. So when we see Jesus Christ, we see exactly who God is. We see his heart, we see how he interacts with human beings, and so on. My principal at Oxford used to tell us this all the time, and it's something that's always resonated with me. If you want to see if something is of God or not of God, all you have to do is examine the life of Jesus in the Gospels. Jesus, far from inflicting evil or suffering or disease on people, and I challenge you to study your Gospels, you never see Jesus inflicting disease and illness and sickness and suffering on people, not once. The only thing that you see Jesus doing is assaulting evil, assaulting suffering, confronting it head on, looking at it in the white of his eyes and annihilating it. That is the Jesus Christ of the scripture. I think as well, and that should be a reason enough to go in and peruse and study the Gospels in and of itself. But I think not only do you see this Jesus that is assaulting evil and assaulting suffering, but you also see this one that has the resources to help the people that are also diseased and suffering. But I think that as we think about these sorts of things, I think whoever was saying that sort of toxic rhetoric, I would categorize it, is that they also have a small view of God in and of himself. That when God does come on that last day, if he does judge, then it wouldn't be a finite, small sort of thing. It's going to be where the author steps onto the stage of reality and of this world, and everything will come into light. So I think that saying that this is God's judgment is just having too small of a view of what God's judgment actually is. So that would be my preliminary thoughts.
Thank you, Alonzo.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so good. We're just, I don't have a lot of time left, so we're gonna try to be quick. There's a question came in, was submitted through Instagram anonymously, and it was, why does John in 1 John 5:17 make mention of sins that don't lead to death? And like, is there a hierarchy of sins? That's such a good question. I went and looked up the passage just now that you're referring to, because I don't hear this talked about a lot. You hear people all the time say like all sins are equal. And there is a lot of truth to that. It is true that whatever type of sins you've done, whatever type of sins I've done, we're not like one person isn't harder for Jesus's blood to wash away than another person's. All sin defiles us and defames God and separates us from him. And so our only hope for being reconciled to God, our only hope for being adopted as his children, receiving eternal life in him, is receiving his forgiveness for us from him. And so the good news is what a hope that is. He has already said, it is finished. His death has paid for all our sin. At the same time, and this, I don't hear this a lot preached. At the same time, according to the Bible, it does seem that there are certain sins that are even more toxic than other sins. My wife and I, as part of our Bible reading each day, we're reading through the book of Leviticus. And it's a book that people chuckle when I mention we're reading through Leviticus, because it seems to be just a dry book of laws. I see Pastor Jason is nodding his head. People chuckle. But yesterday we were in Leviticus chapter 18. It actually broke my heart because of the work I've done on pornography. It broke my heart, and I share this with my wife as we're reading through in Leviticus. God is so serious about the sins he talks about in Leviticus 18. He's saying because of these sins, that like the land is broken. It has actually spit the people out who've been living there. That's one of the reasons God was bringing the people of Israel in to replace these other people, to actually bring an end to these people who are practicing these horrific sins. And he's listening through these very serious sins that have to do with all manner of sexual exploitive stuff. It deals with bestiality and incest and all the stuff. And because the work I've done on porn, as I was reading through it, the list of stuff that God is naming in Leviticus, a book a lot of people don't read, literally it's addressing so much of mainstream porn. The stats are so high on the amount of children that have seen bestiality in porn online. One of the things that gets looked up a ton online is incest in porn. And if people only were willing to actually listen to the wisdom of God in some of the driest books in the Bible, they would see such a beautiful safeguarding from these exploitive practices. In so much of, I know this is really heavy stuff, but in so much of porn, so much of incest and ancestral porn, all this stuff, there's a power dynamic between siblings. And usually it's because one child has become addicted to pornography, often no fault of their own. They're just online and came across the stuff and now they're addicted to porn. They are looking for a way to live out what they've watched. In so many ways, it's true that we become what we behold. We begin to imitate and embody the things that we watch and look at. And that's why it really matters. Oh, it's one of the reasons it really matters that we're so careful about what we're watching, what we're viewing, what we're being entertained by, what we spend our time with. And so it breaks my heart. I hope that this is an invitation for everyone to not just read your favorite parts of the Bible, but to actually give yourself to reading through the whole book and praying, God, speak to me through this passage. The passages you've already read in your life and know so familiar, and the stories you already know so well, and the ones that seem foreign to you. God, speak to me through your word. I've been reading through the Bible year after year after year for years, decades of my life, and I'm not that old. But still, it's because it's teeming with life and wisdom from God. Sin matters. Everything in the Bible, everything that God has said, this is sinful. It's because it actually is toxic. You and I have to hear this afresh. I need to hear this afresh. It's toxic. So often we feel as if God's just a killjoy, as if God is literally just saying, hey, don't do that and don't do that. And it's like, that's all my favorite stuff. Like, why are you saying all that stuff is sinful, God? But God only forbids behaviors and attitudes, lust and anger, inappropriate anger toward people. He only forbids these like mental states and these behaviors because they're destructive. And so I think that passage in 1 John chapter 5, verse 17 is highlighting for us that all sin is toxic, and there are certain things that are like even especially toxic. And so you and I should be, a daily prayer for myself is like, God, would you save me from myself? God, save me from myself. Please make me more like Jesus. If we become what we behold, then let you be people who are feasting our attention, who are beholding Jesus, the one who is love, the one who is the rescuer, the one who has never looked upon anyone with lust, who never objectifies anybody. You and I are so quick to turn the most precious things that God puts into our hands in life and to try to like objectify them and just use them for ourselves. God doesn't just use people. I don't love the prayer when people say, God, use me. It's similar to the prayer, like take me to work, but God wants us to actually to walk with him. And maybe I'll just wrap up with a story. There's a few more questions we'd love to get to. I think it's Devin, Jason, someone texted the question, are demons real? The answer is, if the Bible's true, demons are real, so are angels. But there's really good news at the end of Revelation. You know how, like, for those who love hockey or I guess any sport, coaches try to match up a fair, like if coaches when the other team is putting out their number one line, you'll probably put out your number one line. You want to make sure that you're like ready to go toe to toe with whoever the enemy is. In Revelation, there's a scene that is often overlooked where God sends out one of his angels to go vanquish like the captain of all the demons, the big dog demon. And it was highlighted for me by Pastor George Sinclair. He just said, you know what, like that has to be disappointing. It's embarrassing for the devil when like the captain of all the demons, the devil himself, the serpent, like comes out already just destroy, and God's just like, I'm not even gonna bother sending myself to deal with you. I'll just send one of my representatives. Like it's not a fair match. There's no contest. It's not yin and yang. There's no contest between like God and the devil. And so even as you hear like demons are real, know that the only one that should be scared by the reality of demons and angels are the demons. You don't need to be afraid of it because God himself has just vanquished them. Read through the Gospels, the biographies of Jesus, and you'll see that the demons are terrified that Jesus lives. Anyways, I'm starting to preach again. Let's wrap it up. I'll just check in with James to see if there's any questions he's hoping we get to. But yeah, let's wrap up. I'll ask Alonzo if there's anything that he wants to end with. I'll just say that there is, as we're talking about these really tough things, I want to say thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for sharing your evening with us. Not that there's anywhere else you could really be tonight besides in your home, but I'm sure there's a lot of other digital content that you could be doing. And we really appreciate your time. You've asked some raw questions. We've been talking about some really tough things. I'm sure that the words of Alonzo and through my words and the stories we shared have probably brought up some really tough memories and of your own life for other people. And so we thank you for being willing to be here with us on such a painful topic. I want to just maybe conclude by turning you toward what Alonzo said. When we can't see God's hand, we can trust his heart. God loves you. God loves you so much. Can I just conclude with one more thing? If you got, some of you were at Wilmot back in last time I was with you in person, you may have already heard this, but in Colossians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul, who Alonzo said, a big dog in the kingdom, a baller in the kingdom, he said. He's writing to the people at Colossae and he's saying, put the toxic stuff to death. And then before they've had a chance to change, and he's writing about he lists off some very serious sins. And before they've had a chance to change, they're still reading the letter and they must be doing those sins. If Paul's saying, stop it. He says, as God's holy and beloved, put on compassionate hearts. And he writes all these beautiful things for them to embody. And that arrests my heart. These people are doing toxic things. They're entangled in sins and addictions and habits and behaviors that are absolutely of death. And yet they're holy and beloved as they have received Jesus' love and forgiveness. And so I want to encourage you to hold on to that truth. Rather, let that truth hold on to you. That God has made you in his image. You are of infinite worth. And you are holy and beloved. Holy means set apart for something sacred, for a noble use. God has made you to be light in the darkness. You are holy, even before you've had a chance to fully clean up your life, or even to clean up your life at all. You're holy and you're beloved. Beloved means more than loved. It means you're loved and liked, you're delighted and you're treasured. God delights in you. He has made you in his image. He has made you to be his beloved child. And there's not a certain level of Christian perfection you need to achieve before you are loved and delighted in by God. He made you with all your quirks and special personalities, and he is thrilled about you. And he wants you to know him even deeper. Some of you watching this are like great grandparents and you're just absolute saints, and God still has more for you to know of him. You're not done your race yet. There's so much more of him to be had. And then some of you watching this, you don't even believe in God. Even as we wrap up in prayer in a second, you feel like we're praying to an imaginary friend. What you believe about God, what you and I believe about anything, has no bearing on whether or not it's true. God longs for you to know him and to love him. And that's where it's investigating if it's actually true. Alonzo, would you like to wrap up with any words and close in prayer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. It was 10 years ago that my life changed when I prayed to receive Jesus, to receive his love, and to submit my life to him. Can I pray for us this evening, for everyone that's watching, for anyone that may watch this in the future? If what you've heard about Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for you, that died on the cross so that your debt of sin would be forgiven by his infinite riches in grace and mercy, and rose again from the grave 3 days later, if you're saying to yourself, or perhaps even crying out to God, that God, I want that cleansing. I want my heart to be freed from the sin that is infecting it. That I want a brand new start. That I want peace with God. That I want to know the love of God and to know God directly and personally. It is one thing to think about him as an academic or to think about the arguments, but God is not an argument. God is a person, and you can know him. So if it's okay with everyone, I would like to just pray that same prayer that changed my life from one that was characteristically drug addicted and self-destructive to one where I can try and help people. It was all because of Jesus Christ. If it was not for him, I'd be in some gutter somewhere. And perhaps you're feeling the same way. So let me pray for us as we close. And I'm just going to close my eyes, and Daniel will as well, and just to give privacy, and it just reflects a long tradition of praying and recognizing that we're talking with God without distraction. If this is you that want this prayer, you can just say this in your heart right now to God. God, I am so sorry for the sin, the wrong that I've done. I've both been hurt, but I've hurt others. I've even hurt myself. I have so much yuck in my heart, God, and I need your cleansing. I believe that Jesus loves me and went to the cross to die for all of this sin and yuck in my life. And I believe that he rose again from the dead. And I believe that he wants to have a relationship with me right now, to forgive my sins so that I might have peace with God and to know him personally. God, I want that in my life right now. I confess my sins and I submit my life to King Jesus to show me what he has in store for me. Thank you for dying for me. Thank you for loving me. Bring good Christians into my life that can show me what it means to be a Christian, a follower of Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thank you. Before you leave, just a couple of things I really want you to know. So please don't leave just yet. Just a couple of things. One, James just texted me, Pastor James, who organized this whole thing and who was going to MC it until his microphone just isn't working. Wanted me to be able to say thank you to Alonzo. He also graciously texted thanks to me, so I'll just give that shout out. But more than anything, he and we want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. We're so grateful that you took time to be with us. There's also a couple announcements, really just one. We would love to stay connected with you. I know Alonzo and I both would. And so you can find him and myself on Facebook. We both have like speaker writer pages, and we respond to messages, and we share a lot of resources there. We're both at the beginning side of becoming writers. And so we're both beginning to publish some articles dealing with these questions. I just did one this past week on the brothers Karamazov, and he just published one today, I think, or it's about to go live tomorrow or real soon. So you can find our Facebook pages at my name, Daniel Gilman, or Alonzo's Alonzo Julian Paul. I think his middle name is in there. My middle name is Julian. I would have done so too. Alonzo Julian Paul. You can find us on Facebook, or you can go to RZIM Canada, and you can find our ministry there. We would love to connect with you. I think it's going live tomorrow. I'm going to be running a 4-book giveaway. It's the Super Sam giveaway. We're going to be doing a giveaway for Sam Albury's 4 latest books, and then I'll be doing an interview with him. This is the first announcement of either of those things, and I'll be asking him your questions. He is an absolute boss, literally. So please connect with us. I'm also Alonzo and I are both on Instagram and TikTok. We both are there. I've been trying to figure out, as a millennial, it's very vulnerable to be on TikTok, but I've been trying to figure out how I can be sharing the light of Jesus and apologetics through TikTok. If you join me there, you'll see that I'm literally just trying. And any millennial, I think, has trouble on TikTok because it's really a place for Gen Z. Lastly, I think just as we were wrapping up, I got one last question through, texted from James from someone. I was just like, okay, but let me just read it. Okay, stay with me. Don't leave, please. I'm not going to tell you what to do, though. He said, let's see, got to scroll up. Okay, one more question. With all the suffering and pain around us, how can we still believe in a loving God? And I love that question came through just at the end, because that's literally what we were trying to get at all night. In Alonzo's talk, and you can, if you just are tuning in now, you can go back and watch it. It's fairly brief. He was looking at how the existence of evil and suffering don't necessarily prove God doesn't exist. And he briefly, I'll just try to be even more brief than recreating his whole talk, but he talked about how one of the answers is, might it be possible that God is actually using some of the things that are painful in our life for even not only a greater good in society, but even good in our life. He dealt with that. I'm not even doing a fair representation of his talk, but he shared that. He shared about the comfort we find in the presence of someone else in our life, someone who knows our pain and can share in our brokenness. And there's the beauty of the fact that God himself bears scars, and the comfort we have there, that the reality of evil and suffering don't necessarily prove God doesn't exist. And then in my talk, I try to show how, one step further, how the reality of suffering and pain actually prove that God exists. For me, this is my own journey. I was so close to walking away from Christianity, becoming an atheist myself. because I thought there's so much pain and suffering. But in the quotes I shared with you from Richard Dawkins and Kai Nielsen, the most eminent atheist professors, they have the guts to say, hey, atheism has no way to say that your pain is inherently wrong. Atheism has no way to say that human beings actually have value, and therefore when human beings are exploited, that it matters. No way to say it. It's only in Christianity that we find such dignity bestowed on human beings. So let's just end with this poem, and then I promise it's over, okay? I mean, it's just beginning, but no, the broadcast is over. I wanted to share with you a poem. It's literally my most favorite poem right now. It goes like this. The heavens frighten us. They are too calm. In all the universe, we have no place. Our wounds are hurting us. Where is the balm? Lord Jesus, by thy scars, we claim thy grace. If when the doors are shut, thou drawest near, only reveal those hands, that side of thine. The other gods were strong, but thou wouldst weak. They rode, but thou didst stumble to a throne. But to our wounds, only God's wounds can speak, and not a God's wounds, but thou alone. What captivates me maybe the most of anything about Christianity is that it's only the Christian God that bears the marks of suffering. The other gods were strong, but God was weak. They rode, but he stumbled to the throne. The humility and brokenness of God, the fact that the resurrected Jesus, the triumphant Lord and Savior, bears scars of death in himself. What a comfort that is. Like Alonzo said, when we can't see the hands of God, those nail-scarred hands, we can trust his heart. I want to encourage you and invite you afresh to entrust your pain to the only one who can bring everlasting comfort, even in our brokenness. Guys, we're way over time. Thanks so much for being with us. We'd love to connect with you on social media. Thank you, Pastor James at Wilmot Center Church. And we'll just wait for Pastor James to end.
Thanks, James. Thanks, church. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone.